Welcome to episode 122 of Silver Lining for Learning. And we have a silver lining tonight with blue glasses. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what Silver Lining has accomplished during the past 2.5 years. Also, my friends Chris Dede from Harvard, Young Zhao from Kansas and the University of Melbourne, and Punya Mishra from ASU, Arizona State University, have been working together for 122 episodes now. And this week, we've accomplished something that we have not done in the previous 121 episodes. And my dear friend, Lin Lin, is here from Southern Methodist University, SMU, formerly of the University of North Texas. And she's got an announcement to make for all of us, our fan base out there, might be wanting to hear this. So I am going to turn this over to Lin, who's the editor, one of two editors of ETR&D, Educational Technology, Research and Development, which is one of the top journals in the field of educational technology, which is also working with AECT, the Association for Educational Communications and Technology. And she's going to tell us what the link is between AECT and ETR&D and all the other acronyms that we can come up with tonight. So Lin, would you like to tell us and talk to us from Dallas, Texas? Hi, y'all. I'm from Texas. Lin, take over now.
Okay. I guess we are live, right?
We are live.
Okay. Excellent. Well, congratulations, the 4 hosts of Silver Lining for Learning for winning the AECT Distinguished Development Award. Actually, Dr. Chris Dede, this is the second time he won the award. It doesn't diminish the significance of the award. If you see the list of the prior awardees, you will see that, the people who have received this award have been really outstanding, have accomplished a lot in the field. So it is AECT Distinguished Development Award. And so Dr. Kurt Bonk asked me to talk about the relationship between AECT and ETR&D. So I'm one of the 2 editors for ETR&D, Educational Technology Research and Development, a journal. Actually, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, COVID has helped all the educational technology journals, including ETR&D. I think, because of the need, people want to find out to what extent technology is helping with educational setting. So ETR&D, the impact factor of ETR&D has increased a lot in the past years. The impact factor of ETR&D now is 5.8. ETR&D is one of the top 20 journals, one of the top 20 among about 300 educational research journals, nationally, internationally. And ETR&D is the flagship journal of AECT, Association of Educational Communications and Technology. And this award is one of the most distinguished awards of AECT. So congratulations again. And, the episodes you've done, the high quality, the amazing speakers of the episodes, and the consistency, and just the way you are able to do this, consistently, really have impressed the committee that looked into all the awardees for this award this year. And thank you for your work.
So I will add to that on October 25th at the ETR&D meeting at AECT, they've invited us not only to pick up our awards, but to give a talk, a 55-minute talk. They've actually, because of they know the four of us can speak a lot. So they've extended the time they're allotting. They normally do maybe a half hour. They've extended to 55 minutes special. This is a specialty show. And Lin has promised to get us the Zoom link so we can share it with all the fan base out there. And you don't have to register for the whole conference. We're going to get you the Zoom link so you can attend live, even if you're not in Vegas. If you have not registered, you can still come and be part of this event. So we hope that the week before the show, we'll put it in the chat. Well, go ahead, Lin. Go ahead.
No, I'm joking. Yes, we're going to do it, but I don't know if I want to publicly announce it now. But you've done it.
I always do things I'm not supposed to do. Ask Punya, ask Chris, and ask Young. So I'm the bad boy of the four. So Young and Chris, Punya had to step away for a minute. Would you like to ask, or Punya's back, would you like to ask a question of this for Lin, or anything in general for Lin to address?
Well, I just want to say that AECT has a very distinguished record of service to the field of ed tech, and that I co-authored 2 chapters in the 4th edition of their handbook. And those handbooks are very influential within the field. So it's not just one of these things that, well, it's a conference and it meets once a year and that's the end of the story. It really has many kinds of activities that go on, and it is a gathering place for ideas in the handbook, in the journal, in the conferences, and so on.
If you've done one with David Jonasson as the editor, it was the top of the line. Unfortunately, David passed away about a decade ago, but it's still a very, very, anytime you get an ETR&D handbook, it's really an honor to get in, and all the people involved are at the top of the field, which leads me to the conference itself. For a while, I felt like early on in my career, it tended to emphasize maybe younger people getting moving up in the career, and they still do, but they have a balance between those that are senior people, those are younger people, so you can meet all the people you've been reading about when you go to that conference and actually interview them, get your picture, take it, have a tea with them or a coffee, and you can meet some of the up and coming stars in the field. And they've created new venues for that to happen, new programs and new ways to spotlight the up and coming younger people in the field. So I highly recommend going, and they've increased in attendance to nearly 1,000 people. It's a growing conference. It's a very vibrant conference, and there's lots of jobs within the field, which makes it very interesting to go, because you can hear the different niche areas in which people find housing in. Young or Punya, you want to make a comment?
No, I'm just happy to be given an award. Awards are always good, so I always like being awarded something. So this is fabulous, given what Chris has said about AECT, so this is it's a great honor. Thank you, Lin Lin, and thank our guests, our audience, and all of us. We are really happy. Thank you.
Punya?
Yeah, it's just a couple of things. I think first of all, thank you for recognizing this work. And what's been, when I'm looking back, even when we hit 100 episodes, I was like, this started completely on a whim, with an email from Zhao, and then we met, and there was Scott McLeod and Shangri Chen, who should also be recognized, even though they didn't continue to be host with us. And here we are 2.5 years later, still doing this. We are booked straight till January with 2 Saturdays off, I think, and maybe Thanksgiving off and Christmas off, something like that. And when I'm asked to describe what this is, because it sort of emerged, it wasn't something that we planned and so on. And instead of calling it a passion project, I've started calling it a curiosity project. That it's a project that emerged out of the collective curiosity that we had, not just post-COVID, but further on, thinking about education, educational innovation. And I think that, like, I think some people need to get a lot of credit for a few things. I think Zhao for sending that first email, causing COVID to go on forever. I blame him for it. Because in his email he said, what if schools were closed for a year or more? And I remember laughing because I thought COVID was done in 6 weeks, right? So that's his fault as well, but he at least started the show. So he gets credit for that. Scott McCloud for going and based on a little short conversation, registering a domain name, getting a website, just up and running. Xiong'e Chen for joining at like 4 a.m. from Beijing, while Shanghai and other places were going through like incredible lockdowns, and I think got some of our best sort of early episodes about what was happening in China. I think that was, and I think Chris for with his wisdom and insight, that's where he is the wise person here, because he saw that this is not about COVID as much as it is about what is the silver lining of COVID. And I think that's what has allowed this show to has given it legs. Lots of things people started during COVID, right? Cooking shows, so on and so forth, but they were all somehow constrained by the idea of COVID. And so once COVID became part of our life, and there is vaccines and so on, those things petered out. And I think that Chris deserves a lot of credit for that insight in the beginning, which we take credit for latching onto, and and so on. And finally, Kurt, who I think today gave the most measured and calm introduction I've ever seen him give, and also is the most quiet, calm dress that he has, because you should go back and look at some episodes. He is easily the brightest color and the spark in this group. But I think Kurt, I'm like blown away by his Rolodex. He would have met somebody 25 years ago and he would be able to pinpoint, oh, we met in Sydney and we brushed each other, while walking, and we waved to each other, and I've always wanted to talk to you. I mean, he just knows everybody. And I don't think that we could have had the range of guests that we have had if it weren't for Kurt, right? So I think it's there was an email chain going back and forth about like the listing of the names on the award plaque and all that. And I think we were all of the consensus that this is truly a collaborative effort, that none of us could have done this by ourselves. And it sort of became this sort of sense of obligation to each other, that we are putting in the time, we're putting in the effort. And it's been genuinely a wonderful journey for this 2.5 years. And clearly we're going to go on to at least January of 23. So I think I'm just deeply grateful to these colleagues of mine for making this happen. And finally, I think it's going to be the guests. This show would have had no meaning if it weren't for people coming in. It would be the 4 middle-aged men yakking at each other. And there are huge problems with 4 middle-aged men yakking at each other this day and time, and always has been. And I think we should be cognizant of that.
Being called middle-aged is the nicest thing I've heard today.
Okay, all right. The emphasis is on aged and men, I think, Chris. But I think that the fact that we got such amazing guests to come, and we've never had anybody turn us down. It's an hour of somebody's life, but they've been open to come and share and to engage in this conversation with us has been amazing. And we have a small but dedicated group of followers who, join us every week, and we are deeply grateful to them. Our 100th episode was actually inviting them to be part of the show, which was wonderful to see them, because many of them we had never seen before. And there are people who I don't even know who are, because I can see the YouTube clicks going up. So there are people are finding us, they are watching us. We know some people are using this in their curriculum. That is deeply gratifying for something which is a completely unfunded project. And, and just something that we've done for fun. And it's been great. So, the award just sort of puts a sort of a little bow on it to, recognize it. And I'm personally very deeply appreciative of that. But I think that it's been the journey that's been the best part of it.
I got four
Yeah.
people to thank, Punya. Let me jump in here. We got Scott McLeod back and forth to thank again. Punya thanked him, but we forgot one thing. Somebody is paying for the domain name, and it ain't me. Somewhere, I think Scott, out of the kindness of his heart, is paying for that domain name, even though he's not coming. Is that right?
Yeah, so he's working a second job to get to pay for domain name. That's why he can't come to the show. You know? Gotta go work.
Thank you, Scott. If you're watching the show, we do deeply appreciate you paying for the. Maybe it's cheaper in Denver. I don't know. So second,
that's why he's traveling, so he did not get back to us.
Okay, he's taking over my role.
I think Punya says something I really want to highlight on this. Reflect is I have been really surprised, but pleasantly surprised that nobody turned us down as guests. We have invited some of the very busy people, or high-powered people, but really nobody turned us down. I don't know what's so attractive, why we're, but it is amazing. So I want to really thank all our guests for being here. Another thing I think Chris used to say, we really have no operational budget. We are really a bunch of poor people having I'm using the Zoom for free from University of Kansas, and I don't know what Punya is using to editing. So we're not paying guests anything, we're not. This is actually quite amazing thing that we are able to do, as Punya said, at least until 2023. I think we'll continue, but this is I'm really humbled by all our guest appearances. It's shocking, how that happened.
Well, I want to propose a different finish line, which is that we'll keep going until the value of EdTech is fully recognized by the educational establishment. And I, for one, am willing to come in by Ouija board, at some point to continue my contributions to the show.
So I have a question, Lin Lin, and this may be completely out of the blue, and you can just say no. If I've been thinking a lot about if we had thought about it before we started, that this was going to be this ongoing thing, we would have done something slightly differently. One that we would have done is that would made have part of our workflow that every episode would also go out as a podcast, because it's a bunch of talking heads. This is something that people could very easily, by now we would have 123 episodes of a podcast, which people could also listen to rather than watch us on YouTube. Certain other things in terms of supporting through social media and so on. We have never gone, one of the things we have really valued amongst us is sort of the independence that we have to invite who we want to invite, so that there is no sort of editorial control over us. Just partly can be done because, there is no money involved in this, but that also comes at certain challenges, which is the fact that we don't have the tech support in the background to convert into podcasts and so on. So, I'm just going to throw this out there. I haven't even talked to my co-hosts about this. Is this something that AECT could possibly be interested in being a partner with us on this? So that I have no problem slapping an AECT logo saying sponsored by AECT, as long as we have the freedom to do what we are doing. And you can see it's a quality product. It's not something that is just sort of fly by the night. I'm just curious whether that would be something that was worth proposing as being, to me, this is a good example of public scholarship that all of us are engaged in. Would this be of interest? If not, I totally get it, but I'm just curious.
Well, I cannot speak for AECT, but AECT.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
AECT does have a new CEO. Was Nolan Guger, I think is his name, and he is from his background is very different from. He's not from academic background, and I actually would really highly suggest that I actually just got connected with him and included him in the announcement of this award, and I'll be happy to make a separate connection to talk about this project. Actually, Kurt and I have talked several times about other ways of funding this project. NSF actually just started a new program called Chris may be familiar with this. It's called POSE. So I guess the bad thing about getting the award, you won't be a poser, but they just
That's
awarded,
perfect.
they just awarded the first group of people. I was at the National Technology Leadership Summit. Glenn Bull, I think, was one of the people who got the award. So it's specifically targeted on open resources. And so I think what you're doing is sort of seeding that, open resources, open portal. Mm-hmm. And then there's, I think, we talked about some private foundations, but I think AECT, I'm actually thinking maybe some universities would be interested in sort of putting their logos and then being a sponsor.
Yeah, I mean, before I jump in any further, I would love to hear what the others think, but honestly, I just threw it out there. It crossed my mind. I would love to hear what Chris and I mean, part of why I think we've been successful is we had been very transparent with each other about these kinds of things. And I apologize if I threw something out there in the middle of this conversation without checking with the others first. So I would love to hear what you guys think.
Well, there's Silver Lining for Learning as a brand, and I think that all of us are interested in finding ways to enable the field to get the most out of this archive that we've created. But there's also Silver Lining for Learning as a model of having something where a group of disparate hosts come together and bring out stories of transformation. And I think that the real contribution, what's gotten us the publication in a scholarly journal, in a sense, what's gotten us the award, is that over half of our shows have been about the Global South. And I would say that probably over half of our shows have featured people that nobody's ever heard of. They're not coming to EdTech conferences. They're not publishing in scholarly journals. They're just on the ground, being heroes of different kinds with very limited resources often, and yet being very innovative in ways that people with a lot of resources are often not innovative. So I think that as we think about the role of professional associations, every professional association should have something like this that tells the powerful stories of people who are never going to come to the conference and people who are never going to publish in the journal, but nonetheless have a lot to say.
That's Punya, thanks for bringing this out. Actually, this is a good time to reflect on this. I think the lack of truly editorial control is actually a very powerful thing. I think as Chris is talking about, any organization should run something like this. I mean, this is relying on our own time, our own expertise, our own contact. And we do not represent any organization. In fact, Silver Lining for Learning is not even registered. Someone can use whatever they like with it. But we have created something really, I think, in dynamically. So that is, we are able to bring a lot of people, and then we have some really powerful episodes. So, working with AECT or work with NSF, work with anybody, it'll be great. But I think, Punya, you're right, is that we want to maintain this kind of very loosely organized, purely based on trust. So I think when Chris is talking about any organization, I'm thinking about the future of learning organizations. You got a few people who are interested in and who also have the expertise in certain areas, and then they can technically create courses like this, so I'm thinking about how technology recreate things that happens into the future. But again, I don't know about Kurt and Chris and Punya. This 121, 22 episodes, it seems to be a lot of time of ours, but we also have enjoyed this process. To me, I think that's another thing. If it had been miserable, we probably have dropped it. So that's another thing about the future of learning organizations is what makes you really enjoy and engage in this process. It's also another thing about enjoy doesn't mean you don't reflect. It's also a very deeply reflective episodes. Every time I join, I get off, I really think a lot about who we've interviewed, who we've talked about. So I think Lin, maybe I don't know, maybe your journal should run something like this. We're not trying to sell you our thing, okay? So we're not trying to market a silver lining to you, but I'm actually thinking about a lot of new things can possibly coming up, with new possibilities.
So the journal like ETRD, actually you are going to be invited to have a featured paper at ETRD because of the award. So you just reminded me of that. But ETRD is such a traditional journal. It has its own process. So recently, actually, I've been Kurt actually knows this more than I do. David Wiley and Royce Simmons, Rick West, they've done a lot of work with open access publications. And to me, that's, sort of more, it gives more freedom. I really like what you said earlier about this independence, about reaching to people who otherwise would not have been heard, and reaching sort of really through personal curiosity, through personal connections, reaching to people at all the corners. And I think a lot of times the traditional journals, traditional publication outlets just cannot do those things. And so I think your comments are very well taken there. I'm just thinking, even in terms of sponsorship, once you get sponsorship, often there could be certain constraints there as well. The passion for learning is in such a crisis now, especially looking into educational programs and the shortage of teachers and how difficult the challenges the teachers are having in classrooms, and the challenges that the teacher education programs are having in even recruiting teachers. I think these are all things to consider, but I think you are providing this silver lining for learning, the passion for learning, the curiosity for learning. These are all things that are definitely much needed nowadays.
So at AECT, we'll be presenting on Silver Lining on a Tuesday, as I said before, at 1:30. But on Thursday, I'm going to interview Rick West about his book. And his book is titled Designing, A Design for Learning, Principles, Processes, and Praxis. And Jason McDonald co-edited that book with him. And I'll talk to both of those people. And in the day before, I'll be talking to David Wiley, who was a previous guest on this show. And we've had several guests on this show who've been prominent leaders in open education from Southeast Asia, from East Asia, from other parts of the world. And it is a natural area that we should be interested in and pursue. I will say that what makes Silver Lining kind of unique is that each show evolves in a way we don't necessarily intend. We haven't pre-planned any show. we scripted a little bit. We know when people present some slides and whatnot, but we don't know what's going to be said in any particular show. So each of us is curious about what's going to happen. And that gives a spark to the show. We're not yawning at any time during these shows, or we put our camera off if we are. But, we are as intensely engaged in each of these 122 episodes, and we've all learned from each of these. And so that in turn recruits an audience that's watching, or that might be our live audience that we have right now. I don't know, Punya, have we had any questions from our live audience yet so far? I want to encourage them because we have time that they might respond. But while I'm chatting away here and blabbing away here, I think
they're just congratulating us.
Okay. Well, Dante's there, and who else is there? Dodsy's
Bob
there.
Nelson's there. Dodsy's there. So,
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Bob and Dante and Dodsy. I want to say that we need to thank Young's provost at Kansas, Barbara Bickelmeyer, my former office colleague, who's providing the Zoom link, and maybe she can provide some funding for us in the future. Thank you, Barb. You're not supposed to know this, but you're funding this show. We didn't say that. I also want to thank Lynn for her encouragement within the shows and her ideas related to funding. And there are other people that have been interested in this from the periphery. Ellen Wagner, the past director, or the current director to leave, moving on to the new director at AECT. And there's been other people that have been very interested in it. Also want to thank our future attendees to the show. But we need to thank Punya. No one's thanked Punya yet. And without Punya, this show wouldn't be as creative as what it is. If someone suggested a podcast or webcast show or TV show or radio show, and they said, well, we need someone who's going to spice it up and be the creative underbelly for the entire show, you'd have to pay them a lot of money to do this. And we're fortunate to have Punya every week put the finishing slices on each show, but also the intriguing people with the graphic with the the upcoming shows. So Punya's done a lot of leg work and a lot of head work and a lot of wrist work every week within the show. And he says it's when he's in meetings and he's bored, this is what gives him life. So, I don't think it's an arduous task, but it does take time and it takes thought power to come up with all those graphics that he does, and the intros and the endings and all the ideas that he has along the way for all of us in redesigning the website or thinking about redesigning and telling us what is possible and maybe what is not possible given our limited budget. So Punya, I want to thank you very much. I always have admired your work before we ever started Silver Lining for Learning. To have a chance to work with you on 122 episodes is just amazing. I mean, there's very few people in their careers as an academic get to work with anyone like you for 122 episodes in a row. And, that is something that whatever I publish or whoever I work with, this is something totally unique that I and Young and Chris have, and none of the rest of the people out there in the academic world have. So thank you, Punya, for being part of our show.
You think my email just went to random people?
I think so.
My first email went to the people. I analyzed their personalities, their expertise, their connection. It's a huge Excel file. It's the result of big data. We look at people's compatibility, contributions, and also we check their bank account and the location of where they are. I did a lot of work before I sent out the email to invite people. So Kurt, thanks for highlighting that. But actually, now let's get more serious. Punya raised a really interesting question last week about artificial intelligence. So I really want to deal with that topic because you were talking about, I bet all of us might have read the article wrote by a Stanford professor about AI writing, artificial intelligence, and he showcased about 4 essays that are written by artificial intelligence. Also, about 5 years ago, I think I mentioned artificial intelligence took the entrance exam to Tokyo University and scored higher than 70% or 80% of students. And an AI machine in China, actually 3 or 4 years ago, did the same thing, did the college entrance exam math. and average better than average student. It's not highest one. And Punya, you were talking about the graphics. Why don't you get started with that? I think it's kind of interesting to think about this.
If you go to the Silver Lining for Learning website right now and look at the image that I created for the next episode that's coming up, it's on the front page of the website right now. That image in the background below the text is of this tree, the Bodhi tree. And the two people who are coming in are representing two different organizations in India. One is called the Aswatha Collaborative, and the other is called Sajay Sapne. Aswatha is the tree under which Gautam Buddha achieved enlightenment, the Bodhi tree. And Sapne in Hindi means dreams. So I went to DALL-E 2, which is this AI image generator, and typed in impressive Bodhi tree, dreamlike, photorealistic, and I just typed in a bunch of words, and it created a bunch of images from me, and then I took one of those. This is not a photograph. This is not a tree that exists in the real world. It's one that's just been created. For most of my blog posts now, I use DALL-E to create images. So I'll go in, if I'm writing a post on Marshall McLuhan, I will say McLuhan floating in a world of television and books in the style of Russian posters, like 1920s communist posters. And it will create this amazing image of, and it just blows my mind. And I've been sort of following this for the past few months now. So far, DALL-E, for instance, because it's under the OpenAI initiative, have put filters on what kinds of images can be created. For the longest time, you couldn't create people's faces because there was the worry of deep fakes. You couldn't do a whole bunch of different things. But there is a new one out there called Stable Diffusion. And Stable Diffusion, you can actually run it on your own machine. So if you have an M1 Mac with the new microprocessor, you can download Stable Diffusion, and there are no constraints. There are already inbuilt biases into these systems because these images are being created based on existing images in the world out there. So if you type in the word doctor, the chances are you are going to get images of a white male. If you type in the word nurse, if you type in the word prisoner, the chances are you're going to get a black man. So these biases are already built into these systems. And so I think there are some interesting sort of challenges. There are the positives to it. If I think about when photography first came along, what it did was it shift art from being representational to becoming abstract. So you see Impressionism, Cubism, all these movements start up because photographs can now do the job of representing reality. So art needs to do something else. And so I'm deeply curious and interested in what new forms of art we will generate because of these tools. It's going to be amazing, for sure. But at the same time, there are all these other challenges that we face in terms of bad actors who can use it in different ways. Our political system can't handle Twitter. Imagine if you can have software now which in your home, you can create absolutely authentic, deeply disturbing imagery about an individual, right? Whether in the political space or in the revenge against your ex-girlfriend space, whatever it may be. I don't think we have the systems in place, the policies in place to handle things like that, the psychological mechanisms in place in our Stone Age brains to handle things like that. And just 2 days ago, I learned, I haven't even tried it yet, I've learned of this new, again, open software, which I think anybody can download and tweak, called Whisper AI. And Whisper AI claims, and I have not tested it, so I will take it with a grain of salt, that you can take any audio, doesn't matter what the accent is, doesn't matter what the language is, it will transcribe it and then translate it into English. So this is just the beginning of, I think, what are going to be some very transformative changes. The second piece here, when you combine the power of this computation with the power of the network. So if I go and look at images that are being created by Stable Diffusion, a huge bunch of them are being created by people in India. So the penetration of this technology is also dramatic. So I think, again, I don't know what the answers are to this. I don't know, but I think that these are some incredibly important issues and topics that we are going to face at the level of society, that I think at the level of even our, like the pace of this change is much faster than we are grasping. And I think it's going to shift a lot of things in many ways. So
Well,
that's my rant.
I just want to, Punya, I just want to jump in. There's for example, in terms of writing, it definitely affects how you're going to grade admissions essays. That's a very simple thing, right? I mean, if a student somewhere, get on the system writing, can you detect it is produced by the system?
I have done it, Zhao.
Yeah.
I've gone to these free websites and I said, write an essay on technological pedagogical content knowledge, and it generated a 2-page essay for me.
Yeah. But could you?
And it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, for an undergraduate seminar, that would have been a B.
Yeah. There's another thing that's happening huge. Not in English. You were mentioning about translation. I've been following translation software for the past probably 20 some years. Now Google Translate is truly amazing. If you want to pick, poetry, that's different. You want to pick stories. I'm thinking about essays, writings. I mean, the translation is truly amazing. What does it mean when people are arguing about learning a foreign language from the purpose of, translation communication? So I think that this is, we got to bring Chris, because Chris now runs this center for artificial intelligence and education. So Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't run the center. I'm a co-principal investigator in a large group of people thinking about adult learning and online education. When I was a graduate student over half a century ago, I read the first journal paper that came out on applying artificial intelligence to education, and I've been studying it, following it, trying to contribute to it since. So I've lived through at least 9 generations of AI and at least 9 generations of hype cycles about AI. And it's always overstated what AI can do, but AI is in fact making steady progress. So I want to talk about writing first, and then I'll talk about graphics. The fact that AI can take essentially a set of bullets and turn them into a descriptive product shows how formulaic those descriptive products actually are. And if you've ever tried to get a child to do well on the SAT or the ACT and the essay session, the first thing the tutors do is teach you a formula for writing these things. And the first thing that the graders do is to see whether you're following the formula in creating these things. But think about the newspaper and think about journalism. Journalism is not about writing descriptive essays. People kind of think it is, but it isn't. Journalism is about writing stories. Journalism is about narratives. If you're a reporter and you're doing anything other than the obituaries and you're writing descriptive essays in the way that AI can, you're going to be canned, because to appeal to human beings, you have to add dimensions that AI is not capable of doing. It doesn't understand anything that it's writing. It's just copying. And what that says to me is that we need to understand what writing involves beyond description. And there are many dimensions of that. So I know Glenn Kleiman, who is an advisor to Stanford, who wrote that article. And it's an interesting article. But I read a news story about 4 high school writing teachers who were asked about this and who used the AI system, and they had a lot of criticisms of it. And frankly, I value that opinion more than I value Glenn's opinion, because these are people who teach writing for a living, who understand what it is to create something like that. Art is more complicated, I think. But ultimately, art speaks to the human condition. The great art, the successful art, the artist has captured a way of having us see the world in a new way. I don't know which Star Trek movie it is, but I remember a scene from a Star Trek movie where Bones the surgeon and Spock, the kind of logical reasoner, the stand-in for the AI point of view, are in an art museum. And Bones is all excited about the art, the great art that he's seeing. And he says to Spock, "What do you think this title of this picture is?" And it's a picture that looks like maybe the Grand Canyon. And you have three people on the edge of the Grand Canyon looking out at it at sunset. It's this wonderful landscape. And Spock says, "I think a good title would be Geological Formation Obscured by Life Forms." That is exactly what AI is about in terms of art. So we've had art forgers for a long time, centuries. People who can take a Rembrandt and they can make a copy of the Rembrandt so good that it takes all of modern science to understand that it's just a copy. But and those forgers, if you said to them, "Why don't you paint a portrait of my wife or my husband as Rembrandt would have painted it?" They could paint something like that. They could paint 50 more water lilies paintings in the style of Monet. But there's no market for that. People aren't buying that, because that inner spark of understanding how the personality comes out through the paint is not something that AI can do, because AI doesn't understand personality. So I think what this really illustrates is the hollowness of most writing and the hollowness of most imagery, and people are selling out to think that AI is going to start writing Shakespeare anytime in the near future.
So it looks like Lin has a comment. Lin, you want to jump in on this?
No, I agree with what Chris said. I just think I currently in several projects we are trying to I guess we are trying to speak more like machines so that we can analyze, we can analyze big set of data. But I think we're turning ourselves more like machines, and then and that can be scary. But I agree. I think as long as we can kind of be reflective, and AIs are created by humans, and they are very powerful. They can run lots of thousands, of things, and then make changes. But at least for the moment, I think I think they are still better at certain things, not at everything yet. Hope. But yeah, I agree. I think with what Chris mentioned.
So Lin, if I can follow up what you said, I think there are sort of two aspects to thinking about technology and its role in our lives, and I'm sort of following up on what you said. So one is sort of the purely cognitive, right? Which is how educational psychologists and tech people have typically thought about it. But there is also the sort of the broadly sociological, which I don't think we think about as deeply in that way. And for that, I think you need to go talk to more of sort of philosophers of technology and so on. And I think the point you're making about our communication becoming more machine-like, I don't know if it's more machine-like, but the hidden rules of these technologies guide the nature of the conversation. So for instance, if you look at what social media effectively is, it is an it's a massively gamified system. It's gamification taken to the extreme, which is you get points for everything. If people like it, you rise up. I mean, when you thought about, when we first started talking about like games and learning, and people talk about that we can make learning to be gamified, we were talking in a very small scale. What we are seeing is that gamification happening at a global scale. And that distorts the nature of interaction and engagement and makes it, quote unquote, more machine-like, because those are the rules that we have baked into the system. And very often, because they become part of everyday discourse in some way, they become transparent to us. We don't see those hidden guardrails anymore that are constraining or promoting certain kinds of discourse over other kinds of discourse and so on. And so, I mean, if you look at the printed book versus, even though both are using like social media, both are using text, but one is a much more sit and read and dive in, reflective process, while the other is different, right? Video is a different medium, and so on. So I think there are these hidden structures that guide the nature of conversation. And I think in that sense, that machine-like is what you're saying. I sort of hear that in that piece as well.
So I just want to jump in with what Chris said, Rennie. And again, I want to ask Chris for your wisdom. So what do you describe? I think I completely agree about the nature of, what AI can do, what AI cannot do in writing on art. And however, I think I'm looking at educational systems in many countries, and that is really trying to teach that formula, like the SAT, the ACT. Even in art, there are countries, their art is really emphasizing skills. You draw this line, you do not about the human innovation or invention of those kind of things. Definitely, like we as human beings play with words, we come up with something that's different from AI, But our children are taught, like Lin was talking about, to become more mechanical in order to get high test scores, to get credentials. So I was wondering, Chris, if you have any advice or suggestion to high school teachers, to parents, to students, what would they do? Because I've seen too many students sacrifice their lives, their money, efforts to write a good essay for admissions or for, to better at the essay. It's very sad. They invent themselves to become a machine, right? It's so. Anyway, so Chris, I was just wondering about your thoughts about that.
Well, I have co-authored with one of our alumni in the master's program a brief on intelligence augmentation, IA, which is what happens when an AI and a person work together and they complement one another, rather than the AI de-skilling the person. And we're just starting to understand what IA really looks like. The example that we use in talks is imagine that you're a cancer oncologist. So you're a doctor who works with people who are very ill with cancer. And now people are developing AI assistants for cancer oncologists. And those assistants do things the doctor absolutely cannot do. That assistant can scan 1,500 medical journals that morning to see if there's anything new in the type of cancer or the type of treatment or the knowledge about patients. That AI-based assistant can compare the outcomes for all the patients across the world who have similar kinds of cancer who are now being treated, and can make a calculation that recommends what the outcome should be. And that's great, and that helps to improve the treatment of cancer, but you would never want that assistant to be the one that's talking to the patients, because the assistant doesn't understand that people have different levels of pain that they can tolerate. It doesn't understand what pain is. It doesn't understand what death is, and it doesn't understand that people have different beliefs about death. Some people want quality of life, some people want quantity of life. Spiritual beliefs and moral beliefs about death, cultural beliefs about illness and death, the impact on the family and the economics of the family. I mean, there's all this stuff that the doctor understands that the AI system does not, that lead to the doctor helping the patient to make the right choice. So that partnership is a good partnership, but only if the doctor upskills to really start to deeply understand a patient from a different culture, for example, or a patient who has a very different philosophic position about death than the doctor does. And if the doctor doesn't upskill, then you just are turning things over to an AI that doesn't understand anything about anything. So I think we have to kind of have thought experiments where we play out in different roles what it means to have an AI assistant, how the AI assistant can extend beyond what people can do, but how the person still has to be at the center, because at the end of the day, life is not formulaic.
Punya, what the DALL-E did is makes me feel good, because I feel like I can go produce some art. I can barely draw a straight line. And but what I'm also wondering, if these systems, like when Chris was talking about intelligence augmentation, I love that. That's a great concept. So when we teach writing, when we teach art, can we bring the AI system in? When I used to teach English many years ago, that was when I started, we did not have Google Translate. And later on, actually, I've advised many teachers to say, can you use the translation software to teach language, which actually can be quite good, can be interesting. You can ask the students to correct, the translation. So I just want to leave. I know we're running out of time. I don't really have any wisdom, but go ahead.
Can I just share one thought? So,
yeah.
So Chris, completely second the idea of IA. And in fact, I would argue, and Zhao, to your point, I came from a background in engineering into communications and design. And if I'd have entered the field, let's say 10 years before, I would have been a complete failure. The only reason I can do the design work that I do is because of the digital computer. So for me, I mean, my wife is a graphic designer. She's trained in the traditional sort of techniques of the brush and the cutting and pasting, literally, right? I could never do that. That is just not, and in fact, I have a paper that I wrote with Aman Yadav a bunch of years ago, which talks about this music composer, Douglas Cope, who created this AI software. And the way he works with the software is in a conversation, a dialogue with that software, where he will throw some prompts and the software will come up with variations. Then he'll take one of the variations that he'll build on it. And so so it can also, not just in the medical profession, but I think that in the creative professions can be really powerful. And for me, playing with DALL-E has been interesting, because sometimes some prompts create crap, but then I have to think about, how do I craft my prompts, and then how do I then tweak it further and make variations and so on. So there is a dialogue that is happening with the machine, which can actually be very productive and creative and fun.
Well,
so
I have to say this one thing before Kurt jumps. When you said, DALL-E can create crap, for me, a guy without any art kind of expertise, I probably cannot tell if it's crap. I say, well, it's cool, it's art, DALL-E created this thing. But anyway,
no, it is crap sometimes by every objective marker.
Well, I just want to say this has been a special show, and it's even more special to have Lin Lin, my good friend, with us for this episode, announcing the award that we're going to be getting in October from AECT. I want to let Lin have the last comment before Punya introduces the next show. So Lin, whatever you want to say.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm learning so much. I've wanted actually to be following every episode, but just get distracted all the time. But I bookmark you. I have it you on the calendar all the time. Thank you so much. I thank you for having me, and congratulations again on the award. And I'm your fan for sure.
Do you listen to us in your car?
I do.
Okay, there you have it. Okay, so Punya.
Thank you again, Lin Lin, for joining us today. And I think we're having a wonderful conversation. So thank you. One of the things is that we often don't get a chance to say thank you to each other. So this was a chance, I think, for the four of us to take a moment and be grateful to each other. We don't do that often enough. And so thank you for that opportunity, for allowing that to happen. For the next episode, Chris and I have been working on a series of episodes on India and education in India and the kind of innovative work that is happening there. We've had some episodes devoted to India in the past, but we have 3 episodes coming up. One next week, which is episode 123, and then 129 and 130 will be devoted to India. In each case, we have gone with 2 organizations which are working in that space, in the educational space. So next week, it's a different time. It's going to be 11 a.m. Eastern, because it works for people across the globe. And we have 2 organizations represented and an individual each from them. So the first one is Ashwatha Learning Communities, and the second one is called Sajay Sapne. They work together, particularly around 21st century digital skills, working with rural women, teacher education and development. Fascinating. Had a chance to talk with the 2 people who are Arushi Mittal, who Chris knows, and then Surabhi Yadav. What's interesting about both of these young women have undergraduate degrees in engineering. In fact, one of them has a master's in biotechnology, went and got graduate education in the US, and then went back to India to work in these communities. So really looking forward to that conversation next week at a new time, which is on our website.